How can governments and organisations take the best decisions on how to adapt to climate change?
So the chapter that you mentioned is in fact about effective decision making. It's about trying to capture the knowledge that we need to make effective decisions. One of the ideas that has come out very clearly in the fifth assessment report is the whole notion of iterative risk management. That it's best to really think about climate change as a problem of managing risk, because you're looking at uncertainty, you're looking at consequences that could be large but quite uncertain. And so risk becomes a very useful lens through which to view responses to climate. And the other notion that has come out very clearly this time around is the notion of iterativeness, which is that we learn as we go along. We do not have all the information we need to make decisions. And so we'll really need to have a process that looks at adaptation as something which is ongoing. It's not a one-time job where we say we have looked ahead and we have taken a decision and we are done, because we're really going to keep getting new information and better understanding. So what we really need is the capacity to be able to sort of implement the full cycle of decision making, plan, do, act, learn, and then sort of carry forward.
And how can policymakers take advantage of this approach to adaptation of a constantly changing basis of knowledge?
Well, one of the things that I think it comes out very clearly is the need to have a robust institutional framework for dealing with adaptation. So it's not just a single individual that's doing it. It's going to have response is going to happen at many different scales, all the way from individuals who are constantly adapting to climate. It's all the way from individuals to households to communities and to countries. And so what you need is a system or a set of building blocks that can enable decision making at all levels. I think that's one of the interesting features of adaptation, is that a lot of the response is happening and will happen at very different scales. So it's not just at the national level, but really all the way down to individuals and households.
How can local decisions, how can they help to inform national decision making?
Well, in some way, I think national decision making has to create a set of conditions that enable local decision making, because ultimately, again, at the end of the day, it's the impacts of climate change are going to be faced at that level, right? So it's households living in cities that face urban flooding, it's subsistence farmers that face the risk of droughts and floods, it's individuals who face vector-borne disease change. So in some ways, the challenge is how do we support and facilitate those decisions at that very micro level, but then which are supported by information, by finance, by the mechanisms that will allow those to happen. And that's really the kind of nature of the problem that we face on decision making.
Do you think the world currently has the balance right between adaptation and mitigation?
You can look at this in different ways. I think the multilateral process is perhaps, and rightly so, quite concerned about mitigation. But I wouldn't look at the two as substitutes in some sense. It's not either this or that. I think it's both. Of course, if we mitigate, and take action, radical action, then the scope, the nature of the climate challenge is less, but it will still be there. So in some sense, I think trying to create this as a trade-off is not very helpful. We need to look at it as it's going to be both. We need to do both. And certainly in some ways, adaptation has, although it's gaining in importance, as people understand and see climate change happening around them, I think traditionally it has been more mitigation focused.